Alright, so I emptied all of the vinegar solution out of the gas tank. I have it propped up right now with some distilled water and baking soda. Emptying out the vinegar solution was kind of a pain in the butt. I didn't want to video it because I knew it was going to be a tough process and I knew there's going to be lots of cussing and swearing. Also, of course, it takes 2 hands to shake a gas tank, and that doesn't leave me any room to hold the camera. So I was able to turn the nozzle to the on position, and I got most of it to flow out through the normal fuel line. The rest of it I had to take off the cap, as you can see right there, to try and get as much space as possible for when I turn it upside down. At that point, I got, maybe after half an hour, 90% out of it, 95% out. And then I just sprayed it with some regular water to try and help fill it up so it can empty out the reserve tank. And that must have taken about 45 minutes of just trying whatever worked. Right now I'm just sitting and waiting for the distilled water / baking soda solution to set in. What that is going to do is create a liner so it doesn't instantly flash rust inside of the tank. It's important to use distilled water because you don't want water filled with electrolytes or minerals. Otherwise that's not going to mix well with the vinegar, the baking soda, later down the line the gasoline. It's better to use water that's just been distilled of all that and is as pure as possible. So I went out, I got some Arrowhead. I want to say it was about $2 or $3 a gallon times 4 gallons for this tank. I'm going to let it sit here. It's been sitting for maybe like 10 minutes so far. I'm going to let it sit for maybe another hour or so and just wait with it. In the meantime, I got a master cylinder for the front and rear of the bike. I'm going to try and work on that just to pass the time by. If you'll notice, this ring right up here was still kind of rusty. So what I did, I got a Scotch pad, just brushed up against it, I don't know if you can tell, it got a lot of it off. I think it's just about good enough that it's not going to cause a problem later down the line. I need to go again and go under this part right here, because it looks like the vinegar didn't quite get that high. Not a big deal, the Scotch Guard will take care of it, and I'll just work on the master cylinder when I'm done. Alright, so some other things that I did without recording was I took off the front and rear caliper for the bike. As you can see here, it's the detached front caliper, completely disconnected. I have a drain pan below the hose, just in case it leaks out. I did this a couple days ago, so it shouldn't leak anything new out. However, there is still brake fluid in there, so before I take apart the master cylinder to rebuild it, I am going to have to bleed the brake the rest of the way. Something I wanted to draw attention to is the front and rear caliper. So it's a pretty standard axial mounted caliper. It really shows its age with all this dust and grime that I'm going to have to take off. I have some citrus cleaner and some Ace Hardware wiping cloths, as they're said, which is apparently just a t-shirt that someone cut up and wrote the word scrap on it. It was $2, and it was clearly not the first time these rags have been used. So I'm going to try and clean up some of this mounting parts as well as take out the pistons. For these pistons, it's going to be a little tougher because these aren't hollowed out. For the rear piston, I'll get to that in a minute, it should be a little bit easier because both the front and rear pistons are completely inflexible. So I'm going to need to get some air going through either the bleeder nozzle or just right here where the brake fluid would usually go through and try and pump them out of there. Alright, so here's the rear caliper. This was actually a little easier to take off. First, because the brake pads weren't clamped shut, so I didn't have to fight against the rotor. Secondly, because the way it's fixed in here, it just kind of goes through this nut, and you just have to wiggle it free from one side, prop it out, and then you take it off. It's also going to be easier to get the piston out, because as you can see, that piston is completely shot. It's not going to go anywhere, but it's hollowed out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take like one of those rags and put it around here, grab a pair of pliers or vice grips, and see if I can just pull it out. I think that's going to be the easiest way, just because I don't have access to a compressed air machine. When I did research on it, a lot of people said you either want to use compressed air machine, some sort of lubricant or diesel to try and push through instead of brake fluid, or if you can, ideally, if my brakes weren't completely shot, take the master cylinder and just pump the pedal or grab the lever itself and have it pump the brake like that. For me, that's not an option, so I'll explore the other options and let you know how to take care of a shot rear brake caliper for an old bike like this when you can't use the pedals or levers for it. Alrighty, I got the front master cylinder off. I also took out the brake line because I'm going to be replacing that with a steel braided line because I don't trust the rubber after 30 plus years. I wanted to mention for the two back bolts here, both an 8mm, but for the banjo bolt right here on the side, for both sides, it's a 12mm. So just keep in mind, nothing's a standard 10mm on this bike. And in order to get that hose off, there's right here, it connects to the fender. It's another 8mm bolt. And you just unbolt that, or you probably don't have to, but I did it. It made it a little easier. As you can see, it's not a full circle. There's a gap right here. So if you want to try and finagle it from there with the pretty small working space, you can just try and pry it out. I had to use a flathead screwdriver to act as a pry bar. Then also right up here, where it connects to the lower triple clamp, it's another 8mm. It doesn't actually connect to this though. You can leave this guy alone. I just unbolted this, used a flathead screwdriver, problem solved. You also want to be mindful, there's these two little, you can probably barely see them, electrical outlets. These will connect to the brake master cylinder, and that's what's going to activate the brake lights. So you want to be really careful. I almost completely messed it up. Looks like a little 2-prong power outlet, 1-prong, 2-prong. Just take your time with it. Don't rush it, and make sure you don't bend it. It's really easy to bend if you try and take this off before unplugging these. That's what I ended up doing. So they were a little bent, and I had to bend them back. And they're actually also a little corroded, so I'm going to try and find a way to get the corrosion off of that and make sure they're fully bent back into shape before I plug it in. Alright, so the reason I'm breaking this up into video segments and then mashing it all together in one big video is because it takes about half an hour to make it to the next step. And so for us now, the next step is trying to get all these little pieces on the piston out of the master cylinder. So I already got this piece off. It was really simple. Take this little bolt, it's down here on the bottom, unbolt it from this nut. That is normally something right in there. You got your lever right here. And then after that, take a flathead screwdriver, plops right out. Could have done that on video. It was really simple and easy. This next part, however, just because everything's shot and frozen and all corroded, if you look right in there, there was an O-ring in there. It is now lost in the abyss. But in order to get to it, we actually had to get a specialty part from Ace Hardware. Looks like this. It's got two little knobs on it. And what we had to do with that is reach them in there and grab it to pull the O-ring together, and then try and get it out. It didn't really come out the first couple times, so we threw some WD-40 on it, and that got it to work. Now we're just trying to get that piston right in the center to come out. So I'll update you again once we get it out and talk about what we're going to do next. Alrighty, so I finally got the piston and spring out of there. Took, honestly, probably about 45 minutes just because of how stuck it was in there. Ultimately, for me, what the trick was is on this side, I just wedged a screwdriver in there and took a hammer to it and hammered at it. Got kind of stuck, and that's where the vice grips came in to help me. Also, when I had it like halfway out of here, taking the vice grips and just pulling it out all the way, that kind of gave it the last touch. Really, it's just a game of patience. As you can see, it's quite disgusting in there. That brake fluid is almost definitely the original stuff. And if I put a new master cylinder in right now, it's not gonna be a whole lot better than the old one. So I gotta find a way to clean this out safely without adding any sort of chemicals that are gonna interfere with the new brake fluid I'm gonna put in. So no master cylinder rebuild today, but made a lot of progress, or a little progress in a lot of time. And I'll come back to it on another day and get it hooked up and rebuilt.